Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are joining us for our Emergence online preview. I'd like to say thank you very much for coming along to this. This is the first time that we've hosted this, and the reason that we're doing it is we want to give you an insight into some of the companies that are going to be featuring at the conference. Now, today is going to be completely focused around life sciences, medical devices. For the last 4 months, I've been having conversations with life science companies from around Australia, and this has been probably one of the most exciting, heartwarming things that I have done in my history with WI. Obviously founded the company, we've worked with a range of different opportunities, and the reason is that when you have conversations, you realize the absolute talent that sits inside of our country. You realize the innovation potential that's coming down the pipelines, and also you realize the global nature and the way in which everyone's thinking about this space. So over the next few sessions, where we're going to be showcasing some of the companies featuring, we're going to be giving you insights to keynotes from leading VCs in the space. I'm going to be wrapping up with a panel session, and then I'm going to be providing you with some insights into our investor survey, specifically as it relates to life sciences. We want to make this preview session as valuable as possible for you. So, I said the keynotes we've got Jeff from BioSure Ventures. We've got Hashan from KPRX, and then we've got Julian Salabank coming as well, who've got basically an alignment with the sort of Murdoch Children's Institute. There is so much cool stuff that you are going to learn as part of this. And what we've done is we've set it up so the companies can give a bit of a snapshot as what they're working on. So for you, those of you that are coming to Emergence in person, or if you're joining us online, you'll get a great feel for what are some of the exciting innovations, that are basically taking place at the moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining our Emergence online preview. Enjoy the session, and I look forward to seeing you shortly.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Dubay, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at MTB Connect. Today, I'm here to talk to you about MTB Connect and investing in life sciences. So very briefly, a slide on MTB Connect, just to let you know who we are. We are a not-for-profit originally created by the government, and we are Australia's life science innovation accelerator. We support small startups and SMEs to help bring life-saving medical products from bench to bedside. And we do this through a number of ways. We help deliver accelerator programs that help startups grow and succeed. We also are very much involved in helping these startups access global supply chains and international markets. We do this through our trade delegations and MOUs that we have with key organizations to help leverage those strategic connections and company networking. We also provide connections and information and opportunities for startups and SMEs within Australia. And we are also an industry partner organization for the Industry Growth Program. We also can offer program design services and advisory services for the innovation sector. So why invest in life sciences? Obviously, strong long-term growth is a number one reason to invest in life sciences, particularly given there's an increasing demand for advanced healthcare solutions globally, and that's only going to increase. There's very high value innovation happening, and because of the nature of life sciences and the strong IP protection and high regulation, it creates strong barriers for potential competition, so it's highly defensible. There's very attractive returns that can be had, and there can be very multiple exit pathways in this investment. No two stories are generally alike, and they can look very different. And I'll let the investors that we have go into that a bit more as well. Of course, there's meaningful society impact alongside good returns, and that is something that investors are looking for more and more these days. So that's something to consider. And there's also wonderful government incentives. There's a lot of tax credits that we can take advantage of, and there's significant research grants that often support these companies in their startups phases that can help de-risk them and make it more attractive for investors later down the road. So as I mentioned, there is excellent compound annual growth rates for much of the sector. I'll just briefly mention a little bit about what each of them are. It can be a little confusing. Biotech is anything that's therapies or drugs from biological systems, as opposed to pharmaceuticals, which is chemical synthesis for small molecule drugs. Then you have the med tech sector, which is devices and equipment used to diagnose, monitor, and treat patients. And there can be some overlap with digital health as well, which is technology-based tools and software that deliver support healthcare. Particularly digital health and AI-related growth is expected returns anything up to 20% and is growing much faster than the industry as a whole. So why invest in life sciences in Australia? There's excellent research capability in Australia due to our world-class precincts. There's no doubt we punch well above our weight in terms of what we produce. Our sector is one of the largest manufacturing export sectors, value-add export sectors outside of primary goods. And the market capitalization listed on the ASX grew by a total of 144 billion since 2016. That's a 22% per annum growth rate. Australia is one of the top 10 countries in the world for contributions in life sciences research, which I think really says something for the small country that we are. More broadly, we're home to 2,654 life science organizations, and we employ more than 264,000 people. Australia is home to globally recognized companies like CSL, but also has a very thriving research startup and SME sector. Medical products have also been identified by the Australian government as a priority for investment. So why invest in life sciences in Australia? As I mentioned, we have excellent research capability in Australia, world-class precincts, strong government funding for early research and innovations to de-risk these programs. That includes the Medical Research Future Fund, which is a 20 billion capital base put aside in perpetuity. We have the interest that funds medical innovations. So that's a wonderful program the government put together a while ago. And we also have NHMRC funding for researchers, which is very early stage, often in universities. And we have the Industry Growth Program, which is the baby version or earlier startup support for companies that potentially might get funding in the National Reconstruction Fund for innovation if you're in one of the priority sectors. And of course, there's also significant state funding. I've given Big Breakthrough just as one example, but there's many depending on which state you're in as well. The tax rebate through the R&D tax incentive is actually a wonderful program that draws a lot of companies here to invest in early stage research and is something that we can take advantage of. Australia is also really well known for clinical trial expediency and support, especially for stage 1 or earlier stages of clinical trials. So all of this really early stage investment in research, it means that there's really great opportunity to invest in it. Often these companies will not be able to find investment. We might grow overseas, but we've got some really great examples of why Australia should try and invest in these companies and keep them here, particularly when there's so many great ones. And my next slide just goes into a little bit of some examples of companies that we have had come through just our program alone. At MTP Connect, our accelerators, we use a really rigorous selection process to help identify the companies that will, benefit the most from funding and wraparound support. And we really make sure that these companies have access and connections to the resources they need in the areas to make sure that they will be poised for success. Some great examples are Vivacor, you might have heard of. We invested in them in 2022. They have become Australia's first the first in the world to discharge patients with a durable artificial heart made of titanium. That just happened last year. It was a wonderful success. Synchron is another amazing company that we've been able to help support earlier on. just a couple of years ago, they released the first world brain-computer interface technology in 2024 in an Australian patient. And that's a fantastic achievement for Australia, beating Elon Musk's Neuralink, with the resources they have. Again, it just goes to show the quality of research and capability and passion and drive that Australian researchers have here too. Another great example is Dimerex. They've produced an inflammatory drug for kidney disease and COVID, and they've had some very significant global licensing deals just last year as well. So just briefly, some of the unique characteristics of life science startups are that they have extended development timelines. Biotech and medtech ventures require long development periods, often 8 to 12 years, due to complex clinical trials and regulation. Although that is actually improving, there's things in place that people are trying to shorten those regulatory timelines. But success often does depend on making sure you navigate them as efficiently and as quickly as you can to ensure you have clinical validation. IP protection and specialized talent is also a very key thing. Success depends on making sure that you have strong intellectual property safeguards in place to ensure that you can make the most of that commercialization process and regain some of your investments. Capital, it can be very capital intensive, drugs, biotech, medtech, but there are very high value outcomes as well. Successful assets can command substantial acquisition or licensing value. And when a company goes big, it can literally change the economy of a country, such as Novo Nordisk in Denmark. So there's some really great examples of, even though it can be a long road, a very well worth one. Again, I think I already mentioned mission-driven culture. Founders and teams are often very motivated by patient impact, which can make them very passionate and work extremely hard to make something works and gets to market, a benefit as well as excellent financial returns. And then there's also multiple nonlinear exit pathways. You can have acquisition, licensing, strategic partnerships, IPOs, all before commercial scale, if that was the right path for that company. So this is a very complicated slide. I won't go through it in detail. I just wanted to, I guess, illustrate it really does take a community to bring something like a drug to market. And often before it even reaches investors, there's been quite a significant amount of investment in time and energy, often through seed funding and governments. So it is really something about working together to make sure that this happens, and just acknowledging that there is a significant amount of phases that need to be managed really well to make sure you can get it there as fast as possible. But it's well worth it. Here's some examples of some immunology deals last year. So immunology is a very hot area right now in drug development. There's a very large disease population growing with an aging population for immunology indications. So it is definitely something that can command significant licensing values, as you can see, the major deals that have happened just last year. And just to balance things out, here's the timeline for medical devices. Again, you can see significant clinical trials and regulatory hurdles that need to be managed and planned for to be as efficient as possible. But the timelines can be significantly reduced depending on what class your medical device is. So this can range anything from 3 years to 8, depending exactly what that is. Some things that you can do to reduce risk in this high return sector include having an excellent management team with a track record in product development and commercialization. And sometimes this team can change a little bit depending on what stage it's at, and making sure that they have the support they need at the different areas of the journey. Again, intellectual property, making sure you have defensible IP with freedom to operate will ensure that you have commercial returns. A clear regulatory approval pathway with well-designed clinical trials will help reduce investment risk and accelerate development timelines. a reimbursement commercialization plan. Again, investors probably very familiar with this one already, ensuring you have a defined customer acquisition and go-to-market strategy. And of course, strong early data to show that the product or drug that you're investing in has a clear mechanism of action and has good preclinical efficacy demonstrated. So in summary, life science investments deliver strong financial returns in large and growing global markets. Risk can be reduced through rigorous due diligence and partnering with experienced advisors, particularly if you look at some of the key success factors and make sure they're addressed appropriately, making sure there is compelling early data, experienced, capable team, defensible intellectual property, a clear regulatory and clinical pathway, and a defined reimbursement and commercialization strategy. And that's some of the areas that our accelerator programs focus on. When we identify companies positioned for success, ensure they're supported with industry experts, strategic connections, and resources that help de-risk their products and accelerate commercialization. And thank you.
My name is Harry Rosen, and I'm the CEO of WRS Bioproducts. WRS is building the next generation platform for the production of natural beta-carotene from algae. Beta-carotene is a critical ingredient across food, nutrition, cosmetics, and health products. Today, those markets are being forced to reformulate as synthetic products are progressively restricted by regulators, retailers, and brand owners. Demand for natural beta-carotene is increasing while reliable supply remains limited. That gap is where WRS is positioned. The team behind WRS previously built and operated what was at that time the largest industrial algal beta-carotene production operation in the world. We understand what it takes to run these systems at scale, biologically, operationally, and commercially. We're now applying that experience to a second generation production platform designed to be capital efficient, scalable, and aligned with today's regulatory and sustainability expectations. We've completed extensive pilot work and are moving towards commercial production with a clear and disciplined pathway to scale. I'm presenting at Sydney Emergence conference where I'll discuss the market shift, the WRS platform, and how we've approached commercialization and growth. I look forward to connecting with you.
Hi, my name is Edward Bias. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ventora Medical. Ventora is transforming the way that breathing support is delivered to newborns in intensive care. Our device is the first of its kind, solving impactful and costly problems within the NICU and giving clinicians greater control and insight over the treatment that they're delivering. It's really exciting to see our product being used in patients in our current clinical feasibility study. And we're now raising funds to help transfer our device to manufacture and submit regulatory applications. We're raising funds for this purpose, and I'll be presenting at Emergence 2026 in Sydney. I look forward to meeting you there.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tony Sasse from Snortox. Our world-first award-winning drug strengthens specific weak muscles by direct injection, lasting 4 to 6 months in humans and animals with weak muscle conditions, such as pelvic floor weakness, sleep apnea, facial droop after a stroke, incontinences, motor neuron disease, cosmetic conditions, muscle recovery after injuries, and lots of others. We have a unique product developed at RMIT University in Melbourne, and we have demonstrated high level of effectiveness in treating bulldogs with restricted throat breathing problems called BOAS syndrome by injecting into the muscles of the floor of the mouth under sedation, and we're already seeing marked traction with vets and dog owners alike. We won the top innovation award in the veterinarian market in the United States in 2025, and you'll see why I'm watching Pug Tato the pug breathe normally again. He was on page 3 of the Herald Sun as a result, and the short video clip at the end of this presentation is well worth a look. We're now raising Series A to start human clinical trials and to enter the veterinarian market, and we'll be presenting at Sydney Emergence in February. I look forward to connecting with you there and hope you enjoy watching Pugtato. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jason Sun. I'm Managing Director of iRise International. We are addressing the largest and fast-growing health challenge globally, that is myopia or short-sightedness. By 2050, 5 billion people will be short-sighted, including 1 billion with high myopia, who's at risk of irreversible vision loss. The existing treatments are often ineffective and also associated with side effects. iRising have developed and is commercializing the world's first patented home-use, non-invasive white light therapy. It is the safest and most effective treatment. It is the only technology that can reverse myopia, the only therapy effective against high myopia. What makes this a very compelling investment opportunity is how de-risked we are. We have more than 30 peer-reviewed publications on top journals, regulatory approval already in 40+ countries, established global supply chain, runway revenue of $2 million, with projected break-even within our current runway. With 2,000 active patients already paying us on a monthly basis in a SaaS-like business model, across our initial market, we're targeting 8 million high myopic children, with recurrent revenue potential of $3 billion. We are now raising $5 million in a Series A round to accelerate a global commercialization and expanding to adult indication, a market that is 5 times larger than pediatric market alone. Comparable companies with weaker technology have exited to multinational like Zeiss, Alcon, Eslo, at a valuation far above where we are today. We are seeing a very clear pathway for 10 to 20x exit within the 3 to 5 years. I look forward to share more at Sydney Emergence 2026 conference and connecting with investors who want exposure to a category-defining, disease-modifying medtech platform at the true inflection point. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stuart Bartlett, the CEO of Ferranova. We all know someone who's been diagnosed with cancer, had curative surgery and told it went really well, only for the cancer to later return. Well, Ferranova's vision is that this never happens, starting with gastric and esophageal cancer, where recurrence rates after surgery is in over 50% of patients. Our surgical guidance technology has been tested in 90 clinical trial patients so far, with most patients having chemotherapy before surgery, a group of patients where no other technology has been effective. We're seeing fantastic traction and interest from surgeons, with trials underway or planned at over 10 world-leading hospitals, including the Peter Mac in Australia and MD Anderson in the United States. We're raising funds to prepare for and run our final trial before regulatory applications, with an immediate opportunity to invest in our Series A extension round, where existing investors contributed $6 million, and with a Series B planned for later this year. We're presenting at Sydney Emergence 2026 and look forward to connecting with you.
Thanks very much for having me as part of the build-up to Emergence 2026. Real honour to be invited and talk a bit about our medical technology fund, BioSure Ventures, and what we look for when investing in medtech and life sciences more broadly. So I guess the first question is, why would you look to invest in Australian medtech? We, on a per capita basis, generate more intellectual property than any country on earth when it comes to medical technology. We sit at around about 5 to 6% of IP globally in medtech versus about 70% for the US. But that translates into us being, on a per capita basis, the largest generators of medical technology, intellectual property. But we really fall down when it comes to the development of that technology. So we're great at the R part of R&D. We're really bad at the D part. As you can see from this graph here, if you look at a country like Singapore, they invest about $865 per capita on venture capital. In Australia, we sit at about $129. So we're lucky to even make the top 20 globally. So what this means is there is a huge chasm once IP has been generated in universities to commercializing that and bringing it through to the clinic where it can actually make a difference to patients' lives and also provide a return for the investment community. So I think Ed Husick put it pretty well last year when he said we're virtually giving our world-class science away for free to other countries to exploit, and this does need to stop. So that's the whole premise behind the BioSure Ventures Fund. We invest solely in medical technologies that we really know and understand, have been working with for quite some time. So I guess just to delineate between medical devices and pharmaceuticals, how do these classes differ? Well, if you look at the value, so the post and the pre and post money median valuations, they're actually not dissimilar. So between Series A and Series C, you're looking at about $30 to $40 million valuation for devices, and you're looking at about the same, about $40 million for pharmaceuticals and biotechnology. Where they really differ, though, if you look at the line graph, is in aggregated returns. So you're looking at about a 74% aggregated return for medical devices and about 15% for pharmaceuticals. Why is that? The main reason is that once you start a clinical study, so using the product in humans, with pharmaceuticals, you are locked into a specific molecule. It's very hard, if not impossible, to change that molecule once you're on that pathway. With a medical device, once you're at that first in human stage, if things aren't working as well as you'd like, or there's an opportunity to optimize that technology, it's very easy or certainly possible to do so. In most instances, you can and will because that's part of the development process. So that means that you're looking at generally a shorter timeline to market by the time you go through your clinical trials, but also importantly, you can iterate along the way. Hence the discrepancy between those aggregated returns and those two investment classes. So who are we? I'm Jeff Reed. I've spent my career developing and commercializing medical devices. Andrew Fox Smith, he's kind of worked on the multinational end, having been the previous international chair for, or international president, I should say, for Stryker, but also working in an Australian orthopedic startup called Global, and then Innovus, another multinational based in the US. So he's been very much on the buy side of novel technologies. And then David Bottomley is our other general partner. He's got the funds management experience with a fairly significant focus on healthcare and medical devices previously. We also have an investment committee and advisory board that really fills out our skill set, and we work quite closely with them on all aspects of due diligence as we're assessing novel technologies for our fund. So importantly, what are the key trends and themes in medtech? As you're probably aware, a lot of the multinationals these days, be it pharmaceutical, medtech, or in other areas, don't innovate themselves. They're large bureaucratic entities, and it's often hard for them to innovate at the same speed as startups. So it's an innovation through acquisition strategy. There's also a very big shift to ambulatory surgery centers, or ASCs, in the US. That basically means that surgeries that were once performed in hospitals that required a 2 to 5 night stay will now be performed in the morning in an ASC, and those patients will be discharged that afternoon. So we look for technologies that underpin that transition from hospital-based care to outpatient-based care. AI, as in virtually every industry, is disrupting medical technology at a very significant rate. In fact, we've already seen a lot of disruption, particularly in the field of diagnostics, but also in healthcare delivery. it's going to disrupt some segments faster than others. And so we take AI into consideration when assessing any new technology, knowing that the disruptive potential is going to be all pervasive across all classes of medical technology over time. And of course, GLP-1, that we're all very familiar with, it changes so many aspects of society. When you look at roughly 12% of the US population being on either Ozempic or Wegovy at any time at the moment, that also has many knock-on effects, not just for the manufacturers of the GLP-1 agonists, but also for things like hip and knee replacements. If people are less obese and carrying less weight, there's less need to replace worn-out joints. For sleep apnea, the vast majority of the sleep apnea market, say CPAP machines, are currently people who are overweight. If their weight comes down, it stands to reason that's going to have a marked impact on medical devices like CPAP machines. So again, GLP-1 is going to have a very significant effect across the board, and we take that into consideration whenever we assess a new technology. So what do we look for specifically when we're assessing a tech? It's got to be novel, and it's got to disrupt the total addressable market, the serviceable addressable market, and the serviceable attainable market. I'm sure we're all familiar with those terms, but it's got to be disruptive. Regulatory path is huge when it comes to medical devices. So what does the FDA pathway in the US look like? Obviously CE for Europe and then TGA locally, but really importantly also, what do the reimbursement pathways look like? You can have regulatory approval, but if there's no one paying for those devices, then you could be in a really difficult position. So we do a lot of work on both regulatory and reimbursement. Importantly, what does the management team and board look like at the moment? And how can we work with those founders to bolster their capabilities in both aspects? You've got to have both the horse and the jockey when it comes to developing these technologies. IP portfolio, does it tread on anyone else's IP? How defensible is the IP that this technology has generated? So we spend a lot of time looking at that. Also, how are you going to enter the market? Generally, the point that most novel technologies get acquired is either immediately pre-regulatory approval or post-regulatory approval. As with many industries, the longer that you can hold out for and the more disruption you can create in a market, the greater your value. So we spend a lot of time looking at what that market entry strategy would be, and also, really importantly, what that exit path and timeline looks like. DPI is key with any investment. We're acutely aware of that. So we don't want to be stuck in investments for 5-10 years. We want to know that there are near-term liquidity pathways. So we spend a lot of time assessing what those paths look like. To give you a couple of examples of novel Australian medical technologies that our group has been involved in, Tetratherix, some of you may have heard of it. It's a novel thermogel to treat a range of conditions, both as a medical device, but also as a carrier for certain biologic and pharmaceutical agents. Our group became involved when the business was valued in 2020 around $5 million. We floated that business on the ASX last year for $145 million. It's continued to track very well since then, and we think there's a lot of significant upside to go with some of the partnerships that we've recently formed and will be forming over the next few years. So we use that as a demonstration of a value arbitrage when you get the investment right and when you work with these founding teams to bring those novel technologies to market. Another more recent example of a technology that our fund has invested in actually comes out of the University of Sydney. It's called Leo Cancer Care. It's a whole new way of treating cancer patients with radiation oncology solutions. And basically, instead of rotating 150 plus tons of machinery around a patient, it's a really simple concept where you sit the patient upright and rotate the patient within the machine. It takes the cost of a greenfield site from about 200 plus million US dollars down to about 45 million US dollars. So this is a technology that has CE marking, has FDA approval. They're rolling these units out around the world at the moment. And unfortunately, they couldn't raise any money in Australia, so had to re-domicile to the UK, raise a lot of their capital in the US, and they've got a very clear line of sight to to a NASDAQ listing this year, which should result in a multiple on invested capital of between 4 to 6 times in a relatively short time frame. So look, that's a really brief overview of medtech investing and I guess the way we view things. Be more than happy to have a chat about medtech investing more broadly, or more specifically, the BioSure Ventures Medtech Fund. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Storm from Elemental IV. It's wild to think we're already well into 2026. At Elemental IV, we're building sovereign pharmaceutical-grade sterile fluids and compounded formulations here in Australia, starting with IV saline and water for injection. These are the base ingredients used every day in hospitals to compound essential IV therapies, and Australia is heavily reliant on a small number of manufacturers to supply them. What makes us different is that we're not just producing a single product, we're designing a modular GMP facility that supports both large-scale sterile fluid manufacturing and clinical compounding, including IV fluids, irrigation solutions, and other critical fluid products. This gives hospitals and health systems flexibility, security of supply, and the ability to respond quickly when shortages occur. We're already seeing strong traction with active engagement from state public health and defense. We're also being supported by experienced aseptic and GMP manufacturing leaders as potential investors and advisors, helping us shape a commercially viable and future-ready operation. We're now raising our seed funding to progress facility design and early commercial commitments, and we'll be presenting at Sydney Emergence 2026. I'd love to connect.
I'm Dr. Anya Jones, co-founder and CEO of Respirodime. I'll be presenting at Emergence 2026 in Sydney. On Wednesday, 18th of Feb, I'll be on the main stage at the Four Seasons Hotel, speaking to more than 1,500 active investors. Respirodime is built around something we've known for decades, but haven't translated into a therapy. Now here's the twist. Children raised on traditional farms are much less likely to develop asthma, and that's the farm effect. Decades of research suggest these exposures train the immune system to stay calm instead of overreacting. We're translating that insight into nature-derived therapeutic for adult asthma, designed to reduce episodes and severity. If you're an investor, family office, or fund manager looking at high-growth opportunities in respiratory health, come to the session and connect with us directly. And if you can't make it, please reach out anytime. I'm happy to connect. See you at Emergence 2026.
Hi, I'm George Osmios, co-founder and CEO of Life Assist Technologies. We're an Australian health technology innovator, redefining medication administration across both human and animal health markets. Life Assist proprietary ultrason IQ technology powers 2 breakthrough platforms: MedAssist MyCare for human health and VetAssist VetCare for animal health, enabling the rapid, safe and consistent liquefaction of solid medications, eliminating the need to crush tablets. Our solution addresses a costly and widely overlooked problem: inefficient and unsafe medication preparation that compromises therapeutic outcomes, patient compliance, and caregiver safety. By improving drug delivery accuracy and ease of administration, Life Assist supports better therapeutic outcomes and more efficient care delivery. Our key advantage is our unique ultrasonic IQ technology, purpose-built for both B2B and B2C sectors, with no direct like-for-like competitors. We are already seeing strong traction across both markets and channels, spanning healthcare, aged care, veterinary, and home care settings. We're now raising Seed A round to accelerate commercial scale-up, expand distribution, and support regulatory and market expansion, and we're looking forward to presenting at the upcoming Sydney Emergence 18th of February 2026 event. So go ahead and book your place now so we can connect directly at the upcoming Sydney Emergence 18th of February 2026 event. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carrie Hegarty. I'm CEO of Incisive Technologies. Incisive work is dedicated to developing solutions to improve overall healthcare for all. Our timing is ideally aligned to growing trends in dental opportunities, for instance, prevention and early diagnosis. Like any disease, catch it early, and there are economic and health benefits. Our product is Blue Check. It is a paint-on, rinse-off technology that takes minutes to use and fits easily into existing workflows in orthodontics, pediatrics, special needs, and general practice. Patents and international studies have shown sensitivity and specificity greater than 90%, and clinics are saying the visual impact of my patient seeing blue within minutes of application has a profound impact on case acceptance, trust in our clinic, and profitability. Analysis shows that the use of Blue Check to justify treatments and demonstrate the efficacy of those treatments can increase profits by over $150,000 per year. The capability of our team has been demonstrated by the following: establishing patents in commercially major territories, building a manufacturing facility and a tenfold increase in batch capacity, establishing a sophisticated network of KOLs and collaborations with major dental distributors and oral health companies around the world, securing FDA clearance for Blue Check, creating a U.S. subsidiary and sales team, attracting a major UN investor, CareQuest, dedicated to the improvement to oral health care for all. Our major milestones ahead include introduction of a preservative into Blue Check, preparations to scale up to 50 liters, sales of $1 million, registration of Blue Check in the EU, and a new formulation of Blue Check for at-home use. We're raising Series A3 funding to grow manufacturing capability and accelerate our U.S. sales. I'm currently speaking at the Oral Health Summit in Boston, and my colleagues, Amy Perkin and Rachel Jensen, look forward to connecting with you at the Emergence Investor Summit. Please feel free to contact me as well. Thank you very much for your interest in this important, globally significant opportunity. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rob Ganji. I'm the founder and CEO at Lindo Life Science. Lindo is an Australian medical company focused on preventing infections at the point of highest risk. We are developing Lindo Tube. It is a first-in-class endotracheal tube embedded with antimicrobial blue light, designed to reduce ventilator-associated pneumonia. VAP, as it's commonly referred to, is one of the most common and deadly infection in intensive care. It increases mortality, prolongs ICU stays, and adds tens of thousands of dollars per patient in available costs. Existing prevention measures do not address the root cause, which is biofilm forming inside the tube itself. Lindo Tube delivers continuous antimicrobial action directly where the biofilm forms, without drugs or chemicals, and integrates into existing ICU workflows. We are developing Lindo Tube in collaboration with Mayo Clinic in the US and have secured Australian Government Industry Growth Program funding to the tune of $2 million to accelerate this development. We're now raising capital to progress through preclinical validation, regulatory preparation, and scale towards first clinical deployment. This is infection prevention redesigned at the source. I look forward to meeting you all at Emergence and very excited for the outcomes. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Julian Salabank. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Tegman Fund, and today I'd just like to give you a quick overview with regards to our fund and our activity. The Tegman Fund is a venture partner impact fund, and we're about investing today to impact healthcare for generations to come. We founded Tegman to be different and not just simply a fund, but to be a catalyst. And we knew that early stage research ventures needed flexible support capital that could arrive early and provide the capabilities to grow in unison and partner to be able to deliver via a disciplined and patient approach the sort of impact that we knew that early stage medical research and health innovation needed. So over the years, this has evolved into a whole of ecosystem approach, empowering founders to pursue both purpose and performance. And diversity for us is not incidental, it's intentional. And it reflects our belief that impact flourishes when multiple pathways are pursued. For the Tegman Fund, we have a portfolio that includes digital health, therapeutics, diagnostic, clinical, community, and also broader ecosystem investments. There is a disproportionate overview, I think, or investment with regards to therapeutics and digital health. But as you can see, as I mentioned before, there is a diversity in terms of the areas that we focus on. In terms of the Tegman Fund, our inaugural partnership was structured with the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in 2016, and it was designed to be able to fill that persistent gap in medical research that is devoid of capital and support. And that really focuses on translating world-class discovery into real-world outcomes. What we've been able to do is combine patient capital with embedded commercial capabilities with our team of CEOs, and we can provide a flexible translational model that in partnership can demonstrate how early stage research can move further, faster, and deliver tangible health impact at scale. This model backs bold thinkers, and it enables us to take risk much earlier. And with the capabilities that we have built in parallel with the science, we've been able to attract a whole range of different capital at that really early stage and been able to transition from a research or a health innovation into a product or a service to the market. In terms of the impact that we've been able to deliver, we really focus on the stewardship. So for us, this is discipline. And for every dollar invested, the Tegman Fund has secured a significant amount of non-dilutive funding, and it's greater than 1 to 4 in terms of the ratio. So every dollar we put in, we can generate more than $4 of non-dilutive funding. We really focus on getting cutting-edge medical research initiatives and health innovations, and we want to try and accelerate these discoveries and initiatives that hold the promise of improving patient outcomes and advancing healthcare delivery. In terms of the partnerships that we focus on, it's really about looking at strategic collaborations. And for us, what we've been able to do is amplify the impact through these strategic synergies and partners that we've identified. So we work with some of the largest government and non-government listed private organisations. We've been able to work with organisations like Aritex, the Heart Foundation Vanguard, the AFL, departments, be it health, education, human resources, to name but a few. In terms of the economics, what I like to do is look at breaking down our early stage investments into a couple of key areas. And I can quite easily tell you that if you gave me $250,000, what I could deliver. So based on our existing investments and the money that we've deployed to date, here are the 6 key metrics that we look at. So for every $250,000 that's invested via the Tegman Fund, we've been able to create 3 new jobs. For every $250,000 that's been invested, we've been able to impact over 100,000 lives. For every $250,000 that has been invested, we've been able to develop more than 3 strategic partnerships. We've been able to launch 1 product, generate $224,000 of revenue, and importantly, for every dollar that we invest as both non-dilutive and dilutive capital, we've been able to have a 1 to 7.5 ratio, which means that for every $250,000 invested, there is $1.875 million worth of non-dilutive and dilutive capital that has been able to be invested into each of those projects, which is a significant number. In total, the outcomes from a Tegman perspective, we've been able to secure over $50 million in dilutive and non-dilutive funding. You mentioned partnerships before from a strategic perspective. That totals almost 100 strategic partnerships that we've been able to create. And importantly, we've been able to impact 2.9 million lives directly. So that's not just talking about families and communities and the broader healthcare system that's been impacted, that's directly. For our investments, we've been able to deliver 42 international product launches. We've been able to create 3 self-sustaining businesses with high upside. And importantly, 50% of the investments that we've invested in have been created by Tegman's outside-in entrepreneurial approach. That's where we put our people, our teams into these ventures to be able to support them to grow and succeed. The Tegman Fund is now a pathway that delivers a real avenue for medical research and health innovation. And it's a pathway that is really needed and it delivers, importantly, a meaningful impact to the lives and the communities in which we focus. The path since we have developed this is one of testing bold ideas, learning quickly and building products and companies that allow promising ventures to move further, faster, and hopefully delivers that impact that I was talking about at a large scale. We've helped unlock opportunities by backing researchers and health founders that explore new frontiers, connecting them with entrepreneurial executives and expertise that can build ventures that can stand on their own. Most importantly, the outcomes of the Tegman investments are directly impacting millions of lives, bringing evidence-based solutions into the homes, clinics, classrooms, and communities around the world. None of this would have been possible without the dedication, the skill, and the belief of so many, from our investors and their families to the Tegman team. And importantly, to the researchers, the founders, the entrepreneurs, and the dedicated teams behind the projects and the ventures who show incredible commitment and persistence in addressing some of the biggest health challenges. Collectively, the Tegman Fund is delivering real and lasting value and promising and proving that capital and expertise, when applied with purpose and a disciplined approach, can be the powerful source for change. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss the Tegman Fund with you in more detail and look forward to connecting with you and your team at some stage through the conference or asynchronously. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate. I really appreciate the time and effort that everyone's put into this conference, and I look forward to catching up with everyone very soon. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Leanne Hinch, Chief Executive Officer of Innovic Limited. Innovic is a leading exosome technology company advancing next-generation diagnostics and therapeutics that enable earlier cancer detection and more effective treatment for ovarian and breast cancers to improve patient outcomes. I'll be presenting at the Investor Day Life Science part of Emergence 2026 on Wednesday, February 18th at the Four Seasons Hotel in Sydney. I invite you to attend the conference and join my presentation to learn more about Innovic and connect with us at our booth during the event. See you at Emergence, and thanks for watching.
Hi, I'm James Graham of Recce Pharmaceuticals, ASX RCE. Recce is working to make antibiotic resistance history, which according to the World Health Organization, we've developed the first new class of antibiotics in over 40 years. Why are we different? We work and keep on working with repeated use, a fundamental challenge of antibiotics to date. With multiple clinical candidates across our pipeline, we have many present opportunities, particularly our late-stage phase 3 candidate for diabetic foot ulcer infections. 2026 represents multiple clinical data points, but also sales opportunities with the opportunity of a late-stage approval later this year. I look forward to presenting Recce Pharmaceuticals, ASX RCE, at the Emergence Conference.
Hello, I'm Dr. Rebecca McQualter, the CEO of Chimeric Therapeutics. At Chimeric Therapeutics, we're a clinical stage cell therapy company bringing cell therapies to cancer patients worldwide. We have 3 assets at the moment in clinical development across trials in the US. We're listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Our ticker is ASX-CHM. I'm really delighted to be giving an update at Emergence 2026. Our lead asset, CHM-CDH17, which is indicated for colon cancer, neuroendocrine tumours, and some pancreatic cancers, is almost finished phase 1. We're a few patients away from finishing phase 1, and we have approval from the FDA to move into phase 2. I'm also delighted that we have FDA fast track approval, and we also have an orphan designation. I can't wait to see you at Emergence 2026. I look forward to catching up.
If there was a simple blood test that could help prevent a common cancer, would you take that test? I'm Samuel London, the CEO and co-founder of Biotome. At Biotome, we're building precision diagnostics that shift healthcare from late detection to early intervention and prevention. Our technology, PepLock, delivers a 5-fold sensitivity improvement, and this makes peptide-based diagnostics viable for the first time, including in rapid tests and point-of-care formats. Our lead program, Helitope, identifies high-risk Helicobacter pylori infection that is linked to gastric cancer. So patients can be treated early on with simple antibiotics, preventing cancer before it starts. Helitope is protected by patents in over 20 countries, and we have a global research use only launch in February 2026. We're already revenue generating with over 1.5 million in research services income. We also have strong grant support, and we've got multiple programs running on the same platform. We're now raising a bridging round and presenting at Emergence in Sydney 2026. My team and I are really looking forward to connecting with you.
Hi, I'm Alex, co-founder and CEO at Navi Medical Technologies. We're a Melbourne-based medical device company addressing challenges with the placement and monitoring of central lines, one of the most frequently performed procedures in the hospital setting. Our team has developed the NeoNav ECG tip location system. It's an FDA-cleared product with the broadest indication for use of any ECG tip location system in the world. It's a really exciting time at Navi now. We're closing out a round of funding. We have products deployed in leading US sites, and we're really looking to grow our team and sales this year. I'm attending the Emergence conference to build relationships with investors for our next round of funding, which we expect to commence later this year. Look forward to seeing you there.
Hello, everybody. Introducing myself, my name is Hashan De Silva. Just give you a bit of background on myself. I'm the founder and managing partner of KPRX, which is a healthcare-focused venture capital fund based in Sydney. My background, I started my journey in med school. I realized very early on that I didn't want to practice. So from med school, I went and worked at a drug company called Eli Lilly, which is now become the largest drug company in the world. And at Lilly, we did a number of deals acquiring or licensing drugs from small biotech companies, and I got really excited by the innovation that I saw and all the wonderful work being done by these kind of startup companies. And I made the decision to leave Lilly to go work in healthcare venture and to be able to directly support these companies. And so from Lilly, I went back to uni, did a Master of Finance, did the CFA, worked at a couple of investment banks, worked at another fund out of Hong Kong. And when that fund shut down and the founder retired, he provided me with seed capital to launch KPRX. So KPRX, in terms of our investment mandate, we're slightly different from your typical healthcare VC in Australia. We tend to invest later stage, it's usually Series A and later. And for biotech companies, what that means is it's usually after first in human. And for medtech companies, it can be different based on the different regulatory pathways and the different medical device applications. But if it's a 510K, often we'll invest after regulatory approval because often a lot of the hard work and building reimbursement and usage happens after regulatory approval. But if it's a PMA pathway and they have to do a lot of clinical work before their regulatory approval, we might come in before regulatory approval to fund that pivotal trial that builds their FDA dossier. We launched our Fund 1 2 years ago. We had first closed 30 June 2024. And we launched Fund 1 with the specific aim of backing 5 to 10 medical device medtech, medical device, and biotech companies. So another thing about us is we don't have any top-down overlay that stipulates that we need to be 30% in oncology or 20% in cardiology or 50% in medtech and 30% in biotech. We like to look at each company on its own merits versus every other company that we could invest in and decide what are the best companies to come into the portfolio. And with that, Fund 1 is now almost fully deployed. We've made 7 investments in Fund 1. And I'll give you 2 examples of 2 companies to give you an idea of the wide variety of different companies that we look at and that we've chosen to invest in. So the first example is a company called Inventure, a Sydney-based medtech company that has a healthcare tool that is effectively a 3D printer that can 3D print high throughput organoids for preclinical drug discovery and other applications which we'll speak about as well. And what really drove us to Inventure was that they were the only company worldwide that we could see that could produce 3D organoids at high throughput. So we're talking hundreds of thousands, millions of times, but with very low variability. So when you're doing this kind of high throughput preclinical research, you're often changing your drug a little bit each time to see how the little changes will result in changes in efficacy and safety. You cannot have your actual medium of research changing as well. That adds a lot of noise to the research and actually makes the research worthless. And that's why to this day, drug companies still use 2D organoids. So effectively, it's just the layer of cells that when you drop the drug on and you can see how it works. That does not represent the human body. And it does not predict what happens when the drug moves into human trials at all. And that is widely recognized, and everyone is looking for a solution that can better replicate the human body. And we think Emergence is that solution. So the company has gone really well since our investment. Sorry, prior to our investment, we did a lot of DD on the company, and we sat down with the company and assisted them with focusing their sales and marketing pipeline, rationalizing their cost base and their headcount to really focus on the highest value near-term opportunity, which is selling this device into big pharma to replace 2D with 3D. So since our investment, they have met or exceeded quarterly targets every quarter, and they've gone from 0 pharma clients to I believe 13 out of the top 30 pharma companies in the world. So they've got devices now sold into pharma companies that everyone here would know about, and it's early days in getting embedded, but to have these devices in and sold so quickly is wonderful. Another application that we're particularly excited about and we're really assisting management with is the technology's use in precision medicine. And so we've eventually got 2 pilot sites already using their device called the Allegro in precision medicine. One in Sydney that is using it in children's brain cancer, and one in Melbourne that's using it in pancreatic cancer. So effectively what they're doing is when they're taking biopsy tissue from the patient, using Inventure's technology to print hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of little microtumors and testing various combinations of drugs on the benchtop to figure out which combination the patient's tumor responds best to, but also how does the patient's tumor then mutate and what should be the second line therapy as well. In these patients with this childhood brain cancer and pancreatic cancer, the overall survival expectations are 5 to 10 months usually. It's very, very short from diagnosis to death, unfortunately, is still very short. And so you don't have the time to do these kind of experiments within the patient. We are hoping that these pilot sites will provide valuable data to show improved survival outcomes in these patients with drugs that are already approved, that are already available on the market. Another example of a company that we've invested in is Skin to Neuron, which is a preclinical cell therapy company for the treatment of neurodegenerative disease, focusing initially on Alzheimer's and then Parkinson's. And as you can see, right, you've got one company, Inventure, that is a commercial stage company that is out there selling their device, and Inventure, which preclinical hasn't even dosed a human yet. Inventure, so Skin to Neuron is usually earlier than we invest, but we think that they're now funded to a material catalyst. And so to give you a bit of background on the technology, it's effectively harvesting stem cells from your hair follicles that when injected into a certain part of the brain, because of all of the growth factors and neurotropic factors in that part of the brain, it differentiates into a neuron and it migrates and engrafts for any engineering. And so what that means is the manufacturing complexity and risks and costs are very low, but also the risk the patient around rejection if we're using someone else's stem cells, or the cell becoming cancerous, can happen with these pluripotent stem cells that need substantial engineering to make it become the type of cell that you want it to become. That is at the moment theoretically not existent with Skin to Neuron's technology. And in Alzheimer's disease, the type of patients that we'll be dosing initially, they do not spontaneously get better. They do once it's a gradual degeneration. You don't get reversal of disease ever. And so we think that we will have a pretty good idea if this drug works or not after the initial phase 1 trial in 5 to 10 patients. If we see recovery in a cohort of those patients, that goes a long way to validating skin to neuron. We actually invested in this company in a syndicate alongside a pharmaceutical company, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, who invested for exactly that reason, that this could be a product that can get to market very soon. And we think the exit is after that phase 1 where we can run a process. The pharma company that invested has no first right of refusal or anything like that. So as you can tell, the types of companies in our portfolio are very diverse at very different stages of development, but we've created the portfolio of the companies that we think, the 7 companies that we think were the best companies to invest in. Some might, one of the questions I always get is, well, why are you only investing in 5 to 10 companies? Why don't you do 15 to 20 or 25 to 30? Wouldn't that reduce your risk? That's an argument that I actually fundamentally disagree with. The risk in biotech is all idiosyncratic, biotech and medtech is all idiosyncratic. Whether the company succeeds or fails is often a result of 2 reasons. One is being underfunded, but the other is the drug or device just doesn't work. And so even if you had 100 companies, you cannot diversify away that risk, right? The market risk, however, the correlation is nearly 1, right? When there's a downturn in biotech or medtech, everything falls together, and so you're not diversifying that risk away. So the way we think about risk and the way we mitigate risk is, 1, we like to invest in fewer companies, write larger checks, and actually support these companies more materially to get to that milestone and have a buffer, but also to do as much DD as we can, understand all the risks around these companies, but also be able to support these companies in a much more active way than if our portfolio was larger. We think that's, in this space, that's how you mitigate risk rather than investing in more companies. So that brings me to Fund 2. We've begun the fundraise for Fund 2. We're targeting a first close 30 June this year, essentially doing the same thing we did in Fund 1. So 5 to 10 biotech, medtech, medical device companies domiciled in Australia and New Zealand, with the goal of funding them all the way to that material catalyst or exit, looking to exit these companies usually 3 to 5 years from investment. But I guess the main difference is we're looking to raise double the amount of capital in Fund 2 as Fund 1, and so be able to really back these companies, take a material ownership stake, mitigate our risk from a governance perspective, and really fund these companies all the way to that material catalyst. So yeah, we're very excited. If you have any questions on the fund, please feel free to reach out directly to me. The best contact email is info@kp-rx.com. Our full portfolio and other information about the team is available on our website. That's kp-rx.com. And I look forward to seeing every one of you at the Emergence conference. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stuart Gunsberg, the CEO of BCS2. We utilize AI to improve the formulation of existing drugs. We do this to provide improved efficiency and performance and improve the bioavailability of existing drugs. It's a low-cost, low-risk endeavour. I hope to see you at Emergence 2026 in Sydney. We are currently raising a Series A fund and hope to speak to you then. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Keith Joe. I'm an emergency physician of 25 years. I've treated some very sick people, and many of them have one thing in common: the world's biggest health problem, and that is hypertension. Hypertension has no symptoms, but it affects 1.4 billion people worldwide. And in Australia, it affects 1 in 3 adults. The normal blood pressure cuff has failed us. In fact, the gold standard is to wear blood pressure cuff for 24 hours, called ambulatory blood pressure monitoring. and that's cumbersome and difficult, and you don't get a good night's sleep. Well, at Zaplutis Health, we've changed that. We've developed a device called Aura Connect, and here it is. It's a small device that is stuck on your chest, and it measures blood pressure without a cuff through your chest for 24 hours or more. Furthermore, the device measures your full set of vital signs, and so it's useful for people who are in hospital, and instead of being tied down to the bed with various tubes and devices, it can be stuck onto your chest and transmit vital signs in real time. We're seeking $2.5 million to bring Aura Connect into fruition and get TGA approval. I look forward to seeing you and sharing with you our journey next month. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Guskich, CEO and co-founder of MediGrowth. We are a research-driven biopharmaceutical company focused on improving patient outcomes through cannabinoid-based medicines. What makes MediGrowth different is our dual-pillar business model. First, revenue. We operate a scalable product distribution business with over 16 portfolio products. This business is delivering consistent, accelerating year-on-year revenue growth supported by GPs, medical clinics, and our proprietary digital health initiatives. Second, innovation. We're deeply focused on biopharmaceutical, R&D, and clinical research. We've completed a phase 1 and 2 trial investigating MediGrowth CBD in pediatric autism, and we're advancing trials and novel product development backed by strong university and government partnerships. We're now raising a Series A round to accelerate our next phase of growth, focused on IP generation, expanded clinical trials, and digital health solutions that address unmet therapeutic needs at scale. This year is set to be a breakout year for MediGrowth. We'll be presenting at Sydney Emergence 2026, and we look forward to seeing you there.
All right, welcome everyone to our Emergence preview session for our Life Sciences Investor Day that we're hosting in conjunction with MTP Connect. So for the last 24 months, it's been a real breakthrough for Australian life science companies. And today we're hosting a very unique panel session where we can gain insights from some of Australia's top investors in the space across a range of different areas. And for me personally, over the last sort of 4 months, I've been having conversations with anywhere between sort of 60 to 80 life science and medical device companies. And what I thought was interesting, just to kick off before we sort of kick into the actual panel session, was just to go through some of the observations from those conversations. So some of the first ones, the first thing I asked, and by the way, I utilized AI to actually do this, to go through some of the transcripts of my call. Some of the things that highlighted was the top healthcare problems that was sort of highlighted was the reactive versus the proactive care. It did highlight the high failure rate in clinical trials, and I'd love to get into this as part of the conversation with the panelists about how AI can assist with that. The inefficient diagnostics and the blind spots, and this was probably the most alarming to me. I think I spoke with diagnostics across a whole range of different areas, and you realise sort of how outdated the solutions are. The administrative and the system overload across both the healthcare and the hospital system in general, and effectively I suppose the money sort of sunk and sort of time sunk in that, and the actual true cost. And then the access barriers for vulnerable populations as well. Now, from a trends perspective, things it highlighted was AI-driven diagnostics and precision medicine, which I thought was an interesting area. At-home testing and remote monitoring, and that was a very clear trend across a lot of my conversations, a lot of clinical grade at-home testing devices that people can use for themselves that's currently now only available in the hospital. The AI multiplier in drug discovery and also drug design and drug trial design as well. The streamlining of workflows through digital health, and then longevity and preventative ecosystems. So they were some of the key things that were sort of highlighted in that. So in my conversations. So just to give a bit of a quick introduction, and as we start this, I'll get the panelists to give a bit of a high level on themselves. we're fortunate enough to be joined by Hashan De Silva, who's the founding managing partner of KPRX and probably one of the most known life science and healthcare investors in Australia. Jeff Reed, who's a general partner of BioSure Capital Partners, who does a lot of great work with the universities and some of the upcoming technologies that are coming through there. And then Julian Salabank, who's the co-founder and CEO of the Tegman Fund, which is a venture partner impact fund. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks, Steve.
Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. So just to kick off, can you just provide a bit of an introduction to yourselves and I suppose your own, high level sort of investment thesis and where you're focused on from a life sciences investment space?
Sure, I'll kick off. So as you mentioned, Steve, Hashan, I'm the founder of KPRX. Our focus is broad, is drugs, devices, diagnostics. We tend to be a slightly later stage investor than your typical Aussie VC. So we're looking at drug companies after first in human, medical device companies closer to regulatory approval. And we like to think of ourselves as a very pragmatic investor. So we're really looking at, what are the technologies and the drugs that will make a difference will change clinical practice, regardless of, I guess, how hot that sector is, or regardless of the macro kind of outlook. And we're very bottom up. In terms of my background, I started my journey at med school. After med school, I worked at Lilly for about 5 years, and then from Lilly, I transitioned over to finance, really with the end goal of working in venture and being able to support these companies all the way through to commercialization.
Brilliant. And yourself, Jeff?
Yeah, so my background is more from the medtech commercialization side of the industry. I've been involved with bringing novel technologies to our region over the last 20 or so years, but over the last 5 to 10 years, focusing on working with Australian developed medical technologies. And look, there's various ways you can define medtech, but for the intents and purposes of our fund, it really is medical devices. So you can sort of segment the market into pharmaceuticals, biologics, and medical devices. We've got a very strong medical device focus because myself and my general partners, that's where our background and skill set lies. And also there's a huge funding gap in Australia when it comes to the commercialisation of medical devices. So we started up the fund to specifically focus on that area. Look, we're an emerging fund. We only launched in April or so last year. We're still in capital raise mode, but we have written our first couple of checks. So yeah, the whole premise of the fund is really to focus on that medtech end of our industry.
Thanks, Jeff. And yourself, Julian?
Yeah, so I have a background in business, started in consulting, ran my own businesses, family office businesses. I've done 2 ASX listed business turnarounds and in addition, worked at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute as their entrepreneur in residence for a decade. The focus of the Tegman Fund is to really partner with institutes and with key opinion leaders to be able to assist them at a really early stage. So, Hashan, we're probably diametrically opposed. We are first check, or even before the first check has been conceived. We're at the stage where we're formulating, we're looking at opportunities in the market and how we not only translate but commercialize. And very much, as you said, Steve, the Tegman Fund, we're an impact focused, so we're a long-term investor. We're a partner, so we're very much joined at the hip with the investments. We bring teams of people with diversified backgrounds and then support those ventures to be able to move away from a medical research institute or from a key opinion leader to a venture that can deliver at scale.
Fantastic. And what really sets this up really well is, and when I go through on the investor survey, you'll see the different stages which investors are currently looking at investing, and how we've sort of got the broad spectrum here fits perfectly with that. So just I suppose a question to kick off for all the panelists, as I mentioned in the intro, the last 24 months has been a really bit of a breakthrough sort of period for Australian life sciences and medical devices. So we're seeing companies like Telix, we've seen Neuron, 4D Medical and Clarity all sort of reach multi-billion-dollar valuations. For ourselves personally, we're involved in working with 4DX when they sort of come out of Monash University in that sort of seed round of capital raising. So it's been great to see their rise. But from your vantage point, what has fundamentally changed in Australian life sciences that's actually driving this commercialization success? And we'll start with you, Hashan.
It's interesting. I mean, the last 24 months and even the last kind of 4 years has been a backdrop of probably the worst market for biotech and medtech companies, at least in the modern era. And yet on the backdrop of that, we've seen Telix, Neuron, Clarity, 4DX, Mesoblast. And that goes to a point that I like to make often, is that our companies the macro is often secondary to our companies actually hitting their goals, right? So biotech and medtech companies, unlike other sectors, if they are successful, the actual end product and the end user is quite inelastic to the macro environment. And so even though we saw the XBI falling 80% from its highs, funding dry up, VC capital raising dry up, if a company is actually successful in bringing a product to market, the company gets rewarded. Both the investors get rewarded, the company is able to sell their products, and the end patient and the end hospital is able to buy that product. And I think that's very important when people are sometimes investors can get over worried about what's happening in the macro environment. And so what have we seen, I guess, in the macro environment, right? We've seen a large scale upending in the regulatory landscape in the US, with people being fired and rehired by the FDA, reorganizations at the CMS level, NIH budgets being cut, and not just NIH, various organizations' budgets being cut in the US. And then, as of 2 weeks ago, budgets being reinstated and budgets passed in the Senate. So it's been at least the most turbulent period that I've seen. And yet, in that period, you can get these company successes. 2026 does feel different. We've seen the IPO markets reopen in the US, secondary markets reopen, companies do quite large fundraisings. We haven't seen that really translate yet into Australia, particularly in the private space where we play. Capital is still hard to come by. But one of the other big changes, I think, is people like Jeff and I, our funds weren't running 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Like there are more funds coming up in Australia, specialist funds dedicated to medtech and biotech, but more importantly, dedicated to kind of actually commercializing these products, not just spinning IP out of universities, but really focusing on how do we get Australian innovation, keeping it in Australia, and taking it all the way to market. I think that's a big change.
And yourself, Jeff?
Yeah, look, so because we tend to focus more on private companies, I'm probably not best positioned to comment on the macro environment for listed entities, but we've been through the process with one of our portfolio companies, or a company we've been involved in for quite some time, called Tetratherix. It's a novel thermogel for a range of clinical indications. And yeah, we kind of forced, I guess, to an extent, that IPO window open for medtech businesses. We've subsequently seen Saluda, Epiminder, a couple of others follow through. But the ASX has one big advantage in that you can list a pre-revenue business here in Australia, whereas you can't really do that in a lot of the overseas bourses. So, from a liquidity point of view, I think we're in a fortunate position in Australia that for a good quality business that has a clear line of sight to revenue, there is that opportunity to float businesses locally. But you've then got to follow up with a lot of good stories. And if we look at the examples of 4DX, Clarity, Telix, etc., they've been there for quite some time, and their share price has fluctuated. And really, it would seem that the recent uptick in their share prices, and in some cases, spectacular returns, has been on tangible outcomes, particularly in the US. So I think that's one thing to bear in mind when you are looking at, let's say a private business does it lend itself to an ASX or potentially NASDAQ listing? But I think in most cases, Australian businesses are very much focused on a potential ASX listing. But as we all know, it's not enough just to get onto the public markets here in Australia. You've got to have some really robust and solid paths to revenue, and I think that's why we've seen some of these solid returns in those businesses that probably haven't provided great returns, at least in the early stages of listing, but they're now really hitting their straps, and investors are responding.
Brilliant. And yourself, Julian?
Yeah, to touch on those points, I think it does get back to the team. A lot of those examples you'd made mention to, Steve, I think in the old days you'd say it's a 20-year overnight success story. It's hard graft to be able to deliver the results, but what the teams have probably focused on, I would say, is to touch on your point, Jeff, it's the clinical and regulatory execution. They know what they need to deliver. They need to get the data behind the the actual science to ensure that the market feels confident and comfortable with regards to what they can deliver. And the case with 4D, that then provided the FDA approval, which then gave the uptick in the share price. I think the combining factor as well with a lot of those is there's a real strategic focus. There is an unmet need, and they're driving to try and solve what they feel is the significant benefit to not only the market but also to the shareholders. And in those examples, I think it's the team that's delivered, and it's taken a long time. But I think what we are seeing is probably the ability to circumvent some of the time periods in terms of getting that clinical data and the regulatory pathways to ensure the execution is done in a timely manner. And I think that's what we've seen in maybe the last couple of years.
And so to speak to that, there was one other company I was thinking about mentioning, but they haven't quite hit. They're halfway on the way to the unicorn status, which is EBR Systems Inc. as well, which has obviously got their sort of various approvals and going through that. And I've seen them go from like 130 mil market cap up to sort of 450 to that 600 range, which is also interesting. Hashan, obviously, and I suppose this speaks to the AI part for companies like Conceivable Life Sciences, where it's combining AI, robotics, and advanced optics to help automate IVF. How is AI changing the way that you actually evaluate and invest in life science opportunities, and what should investors be looking for? Because pretty much majority of companies I'm seeing now have got some sort of AI related or AI enabled element to it. How should investors be looking for in AI enabled healthcare companies?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, Conceivable is a great example of automating manual tasks in the back end of IVF. And so in terms of where AI has been in IVF, that's actually been there for a very long time. So there's an Aussie company called Life Whisperers, and another one of the large IVF companies, I believe it was Genea. They developed an AI algorithm that could look at embryos and pick and suggest which embryo had the most likely probability of implementation. And that's been maybe even longer than 5 years, maybe 10 years that technology has been available. But adoption has been slow, and it hasn't been a game changer. And I think the real reason for that is it's the inability to disintermediate the physician, right? So AI can do all of this, but the physician is still there. You still have to pay the physician. And so from a company perspective, what is really the advantage of using that AI, right? If the physician still has to do the same workload, and nothing really kind of speeds up, or the company doesn't make any more money, the propensity to pay is not there. And that's the same with diagnostic imaging, right? There is so many AI companies with the ability to read chest X-rays or CT scans, but we haven't seen any of those companies become a commercial success. And that really has been a regulatory reason, because the FDA still considers the ground truth of what is in that image to be what the radiologist says is in that image. So if the AI disagrees with the radiologist, well, the radiologist is right. And in most places, actually, I think all over the world, the radiologist needs to read the scan, but can use AI as an aid. But what's happened in the last 2 weeks is that Utah is now trialing an actual AI doctor. AI can now interview the patient and can prescribe medicine. And that, if you'd asked me that a month ago, if I thought that was going to happen this year, I would have said no way, no chance. The regulatory regimes around the world is not ready to let a computer prescribe medicines and completely disintermediate the physician. But here we are. So that's a kind of a brave new world. We don't know where that's going to go. I mean, can the AI be manipulated to prescribe, Schedule 8s that shouldn't be prescribed? We don't know the answer to that question yet. But I think a lot of what a physician does can potentially be automated. It's basic pattern recognition. You can limit the AI from prescribing benzodiazepines and opiates and actually kind of just, keep them to do the stuff that doctors maybe don't want to do, right? Like, it's not like anywhere in the world there's a massive oversupply of doctors. And so I think, if we can start to let the doctor hand off some of the easier tasks to AI, we can really see an improvement in the throughput and potentially quality of healthcare delivery. On the drug development side, AI can develop drugs very, very quick. So you can now design, you can go to you can take a target and get AI to design a drug to inhibit the target or do whatever you want to that target quite quickly. Whereas in the past, you'd have to find medical chemists or antibody engineers to do all this stuff, and it'll take a very long time, and there'd be a big barrier to entry. What I'm not convinced is that AI can design a drug better than a human or worse than a human for that matter. I think AI can design a drug and a human can design a drug. So I don't care if a drug has been designed by AI. I don't think it has a high probability of success in a clinical trial at the moment. Now, will that change in the future? Potentially. And what we need for that to change is these AI developed compounds to go through clinical trials. And we can actually look back and say these AI drugs are better or have a higher probability of success than human designed drugs. In the actual running of clinical trials, there is talk that maybe AI can help optimize clinical trial design, but that's marginal. That's really at the margin. Recruitment of clinical trials is still very people oriented. It's the physician speaking to the patient, it's the chief medical officer or whoever it is speaking to the.
And that's a horrible process. Like I've been through it, and that's horrible.
Yeah,
I literally had I think I gave you this example personally, where literally we just got a list of different trials and got asked to choose which one, and they're all in technical jargon as far as what the trials were.
Yeah, and there have been companies that have tried to assist with that and used AI, and so there's been a bunch of companies that try to use AI to assist with that. Every single one of those companies has then gone human, has then hired nurses or clinical practitioners to work effectively in a call center to call patients and help them through the process. So, yeah, because there's such a high level of emotional intelligence required in order to do those kind of roles, I am not yet sold that AI can dramatically speed up clinical trial timelines. But I hope I'm proven wrong. So
Do you think that a quick question I have is, do you think that you gave the AI doctor example that can actually sort of prescribe, do you think that's sort of been driven by the consumer or by the patient level? Because obviously people do have access to various AI tools and they are putting their scans into various LLMs, and they are spending hours on their own, whereas a doctor may only get minutes, or a radiologist may only get minutes sort of looking at a scan. Do you think that that's where it's sort of been driven from?
I think so, and it's the ability to be able to reach these. I mean, AI technically has no work constraint, right? Theoretically, data centers and et cetera, et cetera. But so if you're a patient and you just need something simple, well, why can't you just get that from an AI? And I think that's what's really been driven by. And in the US as well, like you're paying a huge copay insurance cost, and if you're just getting a repeat script, so because of those cost pressures, I think we'll see a lot of these innovations come from the US before. I think places like Australia will be hesitant to take them on.
And for you, Julian, just touching on that sort of impact aspect, you're talking about sort of using AI to address sort of inequality. From an impact investing perspective, how do you see the convergence of AI and healthcare creating both financial and meaningful social outcomes?
Yeah, so at Tegman, we've been looking at this space for a long period of time. One of our partners is based out of the University of Vermont. They've been at the forefront of AI healthcare for over a decade, and we recently invested in that business that's called ThinkMD, and it provides the doctor to sub-Saharan Africa and the global south in an environment delivered through our AI ML supported back end. And the ThinkMD program, to your point, Hashan, it delivers the doctor in your pocket. So it's providing in those areas where there is a significant shortage of doctors in those markets, and where there is a significant need. And from an impact perspective, I think we're being able to deliver at mass via a model that doesn't have the same proportional increase in costs. So you don't need to have a doctor or a facility. We're working with schools, we're working with pharmacists. At this point in time, with ThinkMD, we've now launched out into 8 countries. To the point that you make mention to in the States, where it's they're deploying. I think the States is it feels a little bit like the Wild West. They're trialing a whole lot of different things. They're seeing what's working, what sticks. I think you're right, Sean. The Australian market's probably not ready for that. As we've seen, there's been a bit of a government pushback with the tick and flick approach. And in a lot of markets that we're working with, we're working with the ministries of health. We're WH endorsed. We've had Gates funding. We're providing at a government level the necessary confidence that the service that we can provide is meeting a particular standard. But also we're working through intermediaries. So we're not delivering this at this point in time direct to the customer, although it's only a matter of time before that eventuates. The services that we do have, I think, from an impact perspective, though, it provides a significant amount of data that would otherwise not be collected. That data is now being turned into really valuable information that can support government decision making. It can support pharmaceutical development, and it can represent a minority that is overrepresented from a population perspective, but from a clinical sense is underrepresented significantly. And the excitement associated with that is then leading to our investors. So in the last 12 months, we've brought on some significantly large pharmaceutical partners. Johnson & Johnson is one example where they can see the downstream benefit of what we're delivering en masse. And this is millions of people throughout Africa and Southeast Asia at this point in time. And our aim is to probably validate this model in the global south, delivering significant impact to those that really need it. But then the lessons that we can deliver there, we can then flip into the markets of the US, Europe, and what you would classify as sort of the first world countries.
Interesting. Jeff, you've obviously worked with a lot of companies that are navigating sort of FDA, approval pathways. Sean touched on it before. The reason sort of FDA reforms are designed to shift, or basically designed to accelerate approvals, for breakthrough therapies. How significant is that regulatory shift, and what does it mean for Australian companies and their global ambitions?
Yeah, look, Steve, it's a really interesting landscape, the whole regulatory world at the moment, because we've seen a massive shift over the last 5 or 6 years from Australian companies focusing in the first instance mainly on the European market and CE accreditation, which used to be the fastest path to market, used to take much longer to then get FDA. That's kind of flipped on its head largely because the regulators in the EU have changed from what's called the MDD to the MDR. I won't bore your audience with all the intricacies of regulatory affairs, but Europe is now no longer the first market for the vast majority of products that are developed here, and the US is. Now, over the last 12 months, with all the turmoil in the US, that's kind of been impacted to some extent, but it's very much a product by product assessment that we perform. Like there are some really faster, or I should say, there's some expedited paths to market via the FDA, like the breakthrough device designation, or even another program which takes that to another level, which is called the TAP program, the Total Product Lifecycle Advisory program. So there are these different routes in the FDA that will allow you to circumvent a lot of the bureaucracy and a lot of the time it takes to get feedback from the regulators over there. So one thing we look for is whether a technology where assessing is part of one of those programs, specifically the BDD or the TAP program. And if so, in general, it does really expedite that path to market. Now, as Hashan touched on before, there have been changes at the FDA. A whole bunch of people were fired by DOGE. They were, for the most part, then all reinstated, in some cases a week or two later. So there hasn't been the disruption that I think we all feared this time a year ago, where they were looking at upending huge segments of the FDA, because you've got to remember it is a very big body employing many thousands of people. It has been largely business as usual over the last year. When it comes to AI, they have actually cut a lot of heads and a lot of people with domain expertise at the FDA. So that is definitely impacting timelines to market for AI-enabled medical technologies. But look, by and large, the FDA is still the path that we assess in terms of commercialization for our investee technologies. We spend a lot of time looking at both the regulatory, but also really importantly, the reimbursement pathways in the US. And again, without going into a deep dive in what that reimbursement landscape looks like in the US, one thing you have to bear in mind as an investor is, yes, it's great to get regulatory approval, but who's going to pay? And it is a very fragmented, disparate group of payers in the US that you have to assess. There's Medicare, there's Medicaid, there's the whole litany of private insurers over there. And so a program rather like the TAP program actually ensures that once you get regulatory approval, the government will concurrently work on ensuring that you're going to get reimbursement approval at the same time. So that's for highly novel life-saving devices. So that's great. But the vast majority of technologies don't qualify for that program. So then we look at these alternate programs to ensure that, yes, once you've got regulatory, that's great, but you've got to make sure that someone's going to actually pay for it. So you've got to take all of those considerations into account when assessing any technology's path to market.
And Ashan, what are the key regulatory milestones investors should be tracking when evaluating a life science opportunity?
Yeah, so it depends really on whether it's a device, whether it's a drug. Drug is actually it's simpler because you do the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, and you get FDA approval, and then after that, that's the hard part. But for a medical device, often getting regulatory approval is the easy part, and then everything else is harder afterwards. And so getting reimbursement for a medical device can be very challenging. And I've been doing this for a while now, and I learn something new about US reimbursement every single day. It is so complex, and every medical device's reimbursement pathway is unique. There are different kind of buckets of money that'll pay for one device versus another device. Who's actually the end user? Where is it used? Is it used in the hospital or out of the hospital? Does a patient use it at their home? There's all these challenges that are very, very complex. And so, I mean, there are listed companies in Australia that have gone through this journey very publicly that I recommend that people look at and learn from. And often, a company's share price might go up because they've got a 510K, but the actual commercialization part of that journey is the difficult part. And there is no, for a medical device, there is no kind of you do this and then you will get reimbursement. There is no tick in the box. There are thousands of payers in the US. And then the other question is who's actually applying for that reimbursement? Is it the company or is it the physician? And if it's a physician, how hard is it? So you've got a reimbursement policy in place, but actually how difficult is it for the physician to get that reimbursement? Do they require prior authorization before they see the patient? If they do require prior authorization, are they getting knocked back? What's the paperwork burden? All of this stuff materially affects the likelihood that your device is going to be successful. And so look at each company individually from, I guess, start at the end. Like who's the patient, then who's the patient seeing, how is the physician going to get, or surgeon going to get access to that device, and work your way back. And it's very, very complex. And if there are,
I think importantly in the US as well, Hashan, one thing we spend a lot of time assessing is how is the physician going to get paid for either prescribing or administering this technology surgically or in their consulting rooms? Because there are these CPT billing codes that factor into that whole reimbursement landscape. So I think in summary, Steve, it's really complex. And anyone who's investing in this space has to spend a lot of time gaining a thorough understanding as to exactly what that reimbursement pathway looks like in the US, because it is going to be your point of entry in terms of commercializing your technology. In very rare instances, like let's say an Australian developed technology, will they launch locally first or even launch in the EU? It is all about the US at the moment, and you've got to have a very thorough understanding as to what those regulatory and reimbursement pathways look like.
Yeah,
well, what Ashan was just talking about, that sounds like a great problem for AI to solve, or some sort of software provider to build a solution for.
Yeah, it's interesting. People have tried, but so I'll just leave one final comment. So Jeff mentioned CPT codes. A lot of companies will tell you that a CPT code is reimbursement. It is not. A CPT code has nothing to do with, I mean, a CPT code is issued by the American Medical Association, not some kind of insurance payer. So if you've got a CPT code and you say that is reimbursement, that is just it's not a true statement. right? So for you to say that you've got a reimbursement, you need to have a coverage determination, usually from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, a local or national, preferably national coverage determination that says for this product or this code, we will pay this based on this, based on this use case. And so I think that's actually probably a good takeaway for the listeners, understanding the difference between what a CPT code and what reimbursement actually is.
Yeah, brilliant. And for you, Julian, for you sort of working directly with a research institute like sort of Murdoch's Children, what advantages does that model sort of offer over traditional VC investing in life sciences?
Well, I think we've got this partner model, so we're working with their team. I think that it gives us a unique insight into the organisation from how they operate, how they think. It gives us a great relationship with the key opinion leaders that we're working with, and it provides, I think, the ability to be able to use that infrastructure at an institute as a breeding ground to be able to ensure that we can develop these ventures in an appropriate manner and to get them to a stage where they're then ready for capital. So I think that there is some advantages from the internal workings, but then using and leveraging that to be able to fast track then the development or the scaling once it has spun out. I think it's something that we've found to be really unique. I think a lot of the areas that we're focused on as well, it's not just in isolation. So you sort of mentioned, Jeff and Hashan, with regards to reimbursements and how it fits within practices. A lot of the investments that we're working in, we have focused on either digital or community spaces. For that, we're then looking at enablers that can generate efficiencies, but also deliver outreach for patients. And to be able to use a campus-style environment. A lot of research institutes are aligned with hospitals, as with universities. For us, we can then use those as a launch pad to the clinical practice to be able to then see how our venture can fit within an ecosystem and to be able to then engage with patients and then creating sort of a stickiness that then can deliver an upside in terms of the utilization.
And Jeff, you're obviously dealing with companies sort of quite at the early stage. What are the biggest challenges founders face in sort of going from that sort of proof of concept to the Series A? And what do you look for when deciding to back a company at that stage?
Yeah, look, it's a really broad question, Steve, because there is so much that you have to assess, from the regulatory and reimbursement that we just touched on to IP defensibility. Will they be infringing on someone else's IP? Manufacturability. They're on the product side, but then who the team is, because you've got to have both the horse and the jockey. And time and again, we see really good academic or clinical founders who just don't have that skill set to commercialize their idea. Because being a really good academic or being a really good doctor is quite different to being a really good CEO. So we've got to make sure that they are, one, willing to bring people in around them to help them along that commercialization journey, or in many instances are willing to hand the reins over to a CEO who can then take this idea, this concept, this technology through to commercialization. And often the academic or the clinician will take on a CTO, CMO, Chief Medical Officer type role. So we have to, I guess, see a willingness for these people to build that team. The board as well is often critically important. So yeah, all of those factors are something that we look at kind of in the first instance. That's the first stage of our due diligence. And then we dive down into each specific channel after that. But yeah, I mean, look, over the last 2 years, we've probably assessed 120 to 140 different medical devices that have been developed here in Australia. Very few make it through that process, and it could be for any one of those factors that I've just listed there. And frankly, we'd love to invest in more medical devices or medical technologies, but one, we're a relatively small fund. We just don't have the bandwidth or resources to invest in all the really interesting technologies that come through. So it means that it really focuses us to ensure that we're only investing in the best of the best. But as I'm sure both Hassan and Julian can attest to, there is no shortage of opportunities here in Australia. We're drowning in deal flow, but it is a matter of having that lens in the first instance to try and filter those opportunities down as quickly as possible. And then there just are a number of factors that you have to take into consideration.
And Jeff, by the way, you're backing up our survey results when I go through as far as what's the number one thing that investors are looking for investing into an early stage company. Starts with a team as a 77%. So Sean, just a question for you as far as just from your perspective, what are you seeing as the most sort of compelling opportunities in life sciences right now and why?
It's a good question. For me, I mean, one thing that we've always done is try to disassociate ourselves from the macro environment of what's hot and what's not. And the reason for that is I often find that if you invest in something that's hot now, by the time it's time to exit, it's no longer hot. And so you've overpaid potentially for an asset, and now the market's no longer hot and you can't exit. So we try to take a very bottom-up approach, looking just at the company, just at the asset that they have, the team, looking at the problem and trying to solve everything else in development, trying to solve that same problem, and where that kind of space is going to be in 5 or 10 years by the time this product comes to market or is commercially available. And we try to put our noise cancelling headphones to the macro noise. So at the moment, radio pharmaceuticals is hot. Anything with AI in it is super hot. And I try to look at it from, is this like, let's say you've got a radio pharmaceutical drug that treats, for argument's sake, I don't know, lung cancer, I'm making this up. Well, is that going to be better than everything else in development to treat that lung cancer from an efficacy and a safety perspective? I mean, if it's not, it doesn't matter that it's radiopharmaceuticals, because when it comes time to use it, the clinician is not going to care that this is a different modality to that. They're going to care about what's the overall survival for the patient versus the side effect profile that the patient's going to endure. So we always try to have that lens and try not to get swept up in the heat of the moment, if you will. And so our portfolio at the moment, actually, it's the key macro factor that is determining what we invest in and what we don't invest in is how much capital does a company need to get to a major inflection point. And the reason that's become such a big problem is that there's a drought of capital available in Australia for Australian biotech and medtech companies, that if a company needs $20 million to get to where it needs to get to, well, where are they going to get that 20 million from? And if they can't get it from us and Jeff and a few other funds and Julian and a few other funds that are out there, it becomes very difficult to back that company. It actually becomes very difficult for us to even start DD on, because we can do 3 months of DD on a company and then they can't raise the rest of their fund. And so we're taking a very pragmatic approach, looking at companies. Hey, if we can take this company and back them for X many million dollars, they can actually get to a material endpoint. That might mean some really interesting technology and really interesting companies do not get funded because it's just they require more money. And I hope that 2026 is the year that might start to reverse, where the family offices and high net worth investors that were investing in 2020 might start to come back to the market and can start filling up these rounds again.
When you have these big success stories with obviously companies achieving unicorns, that is the hope that capital gets sort of recycled back into the next generation of life sciences and sort of, and medtech companies. Julian, obviously, you mentioned about your sort of deep connection with the Murdoch Children's Institute. So for you, what therapeutic areas and technologies coming out of Australian research institutions should investors be paying attention to over the next sort of 3 to 5 years?
Look, as Hashan said, this is it's a dartboard exercise, and you got to look at the fundamentals behind these opportunities. But from a thematic perspective, I'd say that genomics and precision medicine is certainly a key area. The Murdoch's been leading the way with regards to that for many decades. What we're seeing now, though, is that the Australian government in particular and globally is now opening the door to using genomic information to be able to assist in broader healthcare. There has been funding that's been provided by the government now for a pre-pregnancy test which is available now to couples. So it's effectively couples screening. That then means that couples who potentially will have a child with one of the rare genetic illnesses can make a decision before the child is conceived or at birth. That's a significant milestone, and it will open the door to further genetic testing. So for Tegman in particular, that's an area that we've invested in. We've got a number of businesses now that are heavily focused in that particular area. Another, I think, what we are seeing is, and maybe this is AI as an enabler, which is now unlocking the health information that is being contained within our universities and our health institutes. Australia has always punched well above its weight with regards to our research excellence, and AI is now enabling the translation of that data. And I mentioned it before with regards to what ThinkMD is doing for the Global South, but from an Australian perspective, what that's doing is now unlocking the let's say the capacity and the capabilities of our institutes, and we're being able to, I think, fast track maybe some solutions that will support then our broader healthcare system. So the emergence of this combined care, I think, is where we will see potentially the GP or the pharmacist take on more of the responsibilities of our healthcare than they ever have before. I've done quite a lot of work in the pharmacy space as a linchpin in our communities. And I think, we're living longer. We've got more assisted care requirements. We've got more need to have a trusted member of our community. And it's probably not AI, even though, as Sian mentions, in the States, they've got an AI doctor. People still want to go and see someone. They want to talk to someone. The trusted member of our community is a pharmacist. You go and see your pharmacist over 20 times a year. You see a GP 2 times a year. And I think what we'll see is an increase in the services that they'll be providing, and there'll be let's say it's a leverage point in a community for a point of commercialization.
What if we dress the robots with AI in a white coat? Do you think that would help, Julian?
It might, and there are examples of that. But I still think that the number one benefit in a lot of let's say psychology and psychiatry, it has nothing to do with medications. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's the relationship you have with the individual that dictates success. And there's still a lot of touchy-feely in our community, in our society. So yes, you might get an outcome, a yes or a no in terms of what's happened, but you need to speak with someone. You need to interpret the information, and we have more information now than we've ever had.
And Sian, we talked about, and obviously it's sort of well known about the capital related challenges sort of in life science and medical device. Is Australia's life science becoming more and more concentrated because of that? And what does that mean for investors that may want to look to build a sort of diversified portfolio in the space?
Yeah, so I've spoken about this diversification or the myth of diversification in healthcare investing before. Given that each of the companies, all of the risk in a development stage medtech and biotech is idiosyncratic, right? Does the drug work? Does the device work? Can the device get approval? Can the device get reimbursement? They are completely independent events. If you have 20 companies, all 20 are just as likely to fail as if you had 1,000. So you don't get any diversification benefits. And so statistically speaking, not statistically speaking, but I feel that you actually get a reduced risk by having fewer companies and knowing more about those companies, doing proper DD and understanding the risk profile and accepting the risk profile, rather than kind of spreading your bets over many, many companies. Because like I said, the risks are all independent, there's no correlated risks, inversely correlated risks. And so and that's how we structured our portfolio. We are trying to reduce the idiosyncratic risk by doing all the DD we can on the companies that we have. And so one of the big risks for companies is undercapitalization, right? So Aussie companies, I say, often do the trial they can afford, not the trial they should do. And so that's a substantial risk to your members, right? So if they're raising 5 million when they should be raising 20, So really to sit down and look at the company they're investing in and try to understand what is their path to market, and does the trial they do, will that actually provide useful information or actually kind of progress them to the next stage? Or is the company just doing this trial because they've kind of decided that's all they can kind of afford? And I think that's where funding is really important.
Got it. And Jeff, like, what do you think are some of the biggest risks? And we've talked about it, extensively, which is great. The biggest risks. What do you think some of the biggest risks investors underestimate when actually entering the life science sector, and how should they think about their portfolio construction?
Look, there is a high failure rate, particularly if you look at, say, the pharmaceutical end, which is one of the reasons we tend to, well, we do stay away from pharma, is there's a 92% failure rate for a novel molecule once it enters phase 1 clinical trial. So once you've started using that new drug on people, 92% of them don't make it through to commercialization. It's very different when it comes to, say, medical devices, where it's roughly 70% of medical devices, once they start those first in human trials, actually make it out the other end and get to commercialization. So there is enormous risk associated with investing. To Hashan's point, you can spread your bets as far as you want, but you're kind of blindly throwing darts at a dartboard unless you're doing the proper due diligence. So that's why we focus on medical devices, because our thesis is that it is significantly de-risked compared to pharmaceuticals, and then you've just got to do the work, and the work's extensive. It really is. What can seem really nice in a pitch deck, and we've all seen the hockey stick graphs. We're out to 5 years. They get through the next 2 years of burning cash, and year 3 things take off spectacularly. I mean, every single pitch deck that we assess basically has that same graph there. And so looking at a pitch deck and saying, oh, on the surface of it, this looks like a good bet, is not enough. You've got to really understand all of those elements that we touched on before very deeply to know that you have de-risked that bet to the most significant extent possible. So I guess if there's one takeaway there, do your homework, and the homework is extensive.
And final question for everyone, just in the last sort of 5 minutes. Looking ahead for the next, looking ahead to the next sort of 12 to 24 months, what's the one catalyst or development that could really accelerate Australian life sciences even further?
Look, I'm happy to jump in there. I think the one thing that we need more than anything else is additional capital in this space. We say it time and again, Australia's really good at the R part of R&D. We're terrible at the D part. We generate more IP per capita in medtech than any country on earth, but we sit about 20 when it comes to VC per capita, to bring those really promising technologies through to market. So I'd say, if there was a mandate that superannuation funds had to invest 1 to 2% of their funds under management into the startup ecosystem, be it medtech, life sciences, or any other area, that would be of enormous benefit to Australia as a whole, as a society, but specifically in the sector in which we work, that would be transformative. So I'd say additional capital would make the biggest difference to us really being able to fuel the exciting developments in the space in which we work.
Thanks, Jeff. And yourself, Julian?
Yeah, look, from a Tegman perspective, we're always talking about pathways. We're looking at non-dilutive pathways. We're looking at partnership pathways, capital pathways, commercialization pathways. To Jeff's point, I think we are, what is it, over $3 trillion in our superannuation. I mean, it's a significant amount of money that the Australian government or the Australian peoples have access to. I think if there was an increase in the risk appetite of that, we would probably be accelerating the commercialization within our medical research and broader health marketplaces. Combined with that, I think we do have the Medical Research Future Fund. That is over several $1 billion as well. That is supporting that early stage from a non-dilutive perspective. There is, I think, though, the turning point comes when we've got enough of those unicorns, as you talked about, Steve. The Australian businesses that are doing good, and people can then see that we are capable. And that will then attract people from either overseas or from our universities or from our corporate markets to be able to really back and support those businesses. So, in the next couple of years, I'd love for a few of those super funds, as Jeff said, I couldn't agree more, to be able to direct more of that patient capital towards the earlier stage check size. From a Tegman perspective, a decade ago when we started what we're doing, we hoped that we would be a catalyst for a number of other really true early stage funds, and there are now some governments, both in Victoria, New South Wales, and universities that are now opening the door to more early stage funding, and I think it's the risk profile. So we need to have some really confident investments and investors, knowing, as Jeff said, that a high percentage of them are going to fail. But in health, if you get it right, the returns are fantastically overwhelming. And that's it from me.
And Sean, the final word?
Yeah, I'd say two aspects. Firstly, government support, right? At the moment in our sector, the area that we're missing is venture capital. I think Jeff used the 20th percentile, the 20th in terms of venture capital per capita. I don't know if that's like all venture capital, but I think if you pulled out healthcare specific venture capital dollars, that could be even much worse. Right?
It is worse. It is worse. Yeah.
We've got the Airtrees and the Blackbirds that are actually quite large, successful venture capital funds. But in healthcare, we don't really have any. And so the government, instead of supporting venture capital, has kind of decided to disintermediate venture capital and invest directly in companies themselves, which I don't know who thought that was a good idea. I mean, anyways, I could go on a rant on that. But so I think the government needs to support and actually see value in what we do. I mean, we are a part of the ecosystem and a crucial part of the ecosystem that has really driven a lot of what we've seen in the US. The other thing around super funds, I think the way the super funds have been regulated has been incorrect. The idea that there's a short-term 1-year performance metric, and if you don't meet that performance metric, you have to write letters to your members, and that whole My Super My Choice legislation has meant that a super fund that is the tiniest super fund to the largest super fund, they're doing exactly the same thing. So if you're like a very, very small super fund, you're looking at what Oz Super and Aware Super and ART are doing because they're all publicly available and just meeting their kind of benchmark allocation. And so the small guys that can do interesting things, write smaller checks into new startup funds, aren't doing it, right? And this whole focus on fees and not on net returns has meant that they're all in indexes, not in funds that actually go out there and support local innovation. And so I think there's a lot of wholesale changes to. I think super funds potentially need less regulation than more regulation, and let the free market decide which is a good fund and which is a bad fund, and the members can decide based on that. And I'm all up for transparency being as high as it can be, but I think there's been too much regulation that has created perverse incentives that has meant that there is less money for us and for our future, as in Australian future, than there would otherwise be. And so I think I'll leave it at that.
Well, Jen, so really appreciate your time today. And we've obviously covered a lot of areas inside of this. And just mention that, just a final sort of takeaway, Julian. I always like to refer to the mining sector. If you think about the actual importance of the recycling of capital becomes so important, because whenever you do trips to Perth and you go and speak to a lot of different mining companies, mate, you realize that they're literally just laying out different areas of dirt they want to dig, and they've got various reasons why they want to, but the capital is always there to do it, and it's only because there's been so much money made in that process, and they've got a whole ecosystem around the brokers, the advisors, the sort of investment bankers, the companies, the executives. There's just such a great. And you sort of look at, how, what needs to happen, or how much needs to be returned for that sort of ecosystem in Australia to be built to actually commercialize all the IP you talked about. And like I'll say personally, it's been one of the best things ever for me working with MTP Connect and all their various companies, because when you actually speak to all the different founders and you learn about what they're building, you realize there's just so much opportunity that sits inside of Australia from an IP perspective. And you're also right in that, there could be 10 versions of what we do, or there could be 10 times the amount of VCs, and it just wouldn't even satisfy the amount of deal flow that's coming out. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate all your insights, and look forward to having you all at Emergence.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve.
So welcome to the final part of our Emergence preview series for our Life Sciences Investor component. Now, do note, we are going to be hosting the second part of our Emergence preview on Monday, February the 2nd, so we'll be inviting you to join us for that. In this final part, I'm actually going to be going through the latest survey results as it specifically relates to life sciences. So we just had a great panel session with Jeff, Hashan, and Julian, and I think some of the insights that they highlighted in this really align, and it's fascinating to see. So let me go through it. And so basically this all comes from the recent survey that we did that went out to our investor ecosystem. And what was really important is to understand, as far as to understand the interest in life sciences right now. So life sciences and health tech remain top priorities from a capital perspective. So 32% of investors plan to actively deploy in the health tech and med tech space in 2026. 31% are targeting life sciences and biotech specifically. So this effectively places healthcare-related opportunities among the most sought-after categories from an investment perspective, alongside deep tech and also private equity. And some would argue that life sciences sort of covers into the deep tech as well. What was really interesting is the shift towards longevity and chronic care. So we asked a question around investors' personal conviction. So the personal conviction part is definitely shifting towards long-term health outcomes and complex disease management. 27% of investor surveys express deep conviction or personal experience in aging, longevity, and elder care. 13% are specifically focused on problems related to chronic illness and rare disease. And 16.5% highlighted mental health and well-being as a priority area. And you probably would know that sort of over the last 5 years, that has become a real sort of focal point, just given the skyrocketing challenges around mental health. And you sort of see it, it's also transferring over to the workplace as well. Some recent stats, I can't remember the amount, but as far as workers' compensation claims, is somewhere between 80 to 90% are now mental related. Now, there's obviously debates about that, but they're the numbers. So the trust markers that investors are looking for in life science deals, and this was beautifully highlighted by Jeff. So 75% of investors state that management track record, previous exit, industry experience, etc., is a top factor in their decision to engage with a company. Interesting enough, 30% specifically look for IP and research depth, including patents, university collaborations, clinical data, which is obviously critical from a life science validation perspective. Now, this one is really interesting, and this, I think, was second on the list, but 56% emphasize the importance of a competitive moat and some sort of barrier to entry. And I think the important part about that, and why you're seeing life science and medical device so high at the moment, is that the last 2 years, the software area has just been absolutely disrupted. You know, the likes of Claude Code, what ChatGPT is, or OpenAI is doing, and even Google and XAI, etc. You can definitely see that it's becoming a lot harder for software companies to build themselves a competitive moat, especially in the early days. The preferred funding stages, also very interesting, and it was actually quite well reflected amongst the guys, is that 47.5% of investors are looking for Series A, B opportunities where the technology is sort of already validated. 40% are still willing to engage at the seed and pre-revenue stage of high risk, high reward. So it obviously shows that, you know, exactly what the guys are saying. You're very well aware that when you're going into sort of life science or medical device opportunities, you're very well aware of the risk reward aspect. Interesting enough, from a liquidity perspective, the target liquidity horizon is predominantly between 3 to 7 years. So 3 to 5 years was 46%, and then 5 to 7 years was actually 25%. So suggesting a need that a clear sort of clinical exit milestone was important in those windows. And then the last one was the deep operational sort of expertise. So what we found that in doing the survey, investors were looking to offer more than just capital. and there's a significant amount of smart money that's available within our ecosystem, specifically for life science founders as well. So 25% of investors mentioned that they have deep operational expertise in healthcare, pharma, and biotech, which is very interesting. And then 62% of investors are open to engaging as an advisor or mentor or opening the door to strategic ad hoc support for their companies. And then the last one, I mentioned 38% are willing to take board level positions. And the final one, I've just missed putting it on here, but I think the last one was 23% of the investors that actually that participated highlighted that they were willing to lead or organize syndicate rounds with potential investors, with other investors. And I suppose that really shows the potential multiplier effect within our investor ecosystem. So this was a really good, from my perspective, I was so happy to see that life sciences, healthcare and deep tech were so high on the list. And it really does confirm what's taking place in the market as far as where everyone for the last, however long has been focused on, the most scalable SaaS company or SaaS-based solutions they can come up with. It seems investors are moving more towards back the sort of deep sciences area and real, opportunities that have some type of tangible sort of moat, whether it be from an IP perspective, a regulatory perspective, a data perspective, etc. So very interesting to see these changes taking place, and it does set up incredibly well for the opportunities that we're going to be showcasing at Emergence. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for our Emergence preview. I hope you've enjoyed the insights into the companies that have been featured, and then obviously the keynote presentations from the guides, and obviously the panel session we just had. We are very excited to be hosting Emergence. I can't believe we're sort of just under 3 weeks away. We've already got over 850 registrations for it. This will be the biggest Emergence that we have ever hosted, and best of all, it's going to be some of the most fascinating and exciting opportunities that we've ever brought to the table. For me personally, I mentioned it in that session. Doing this work, with MTP Connect and with all the sort of other companies that I'm dealing with across renewable energies, deep tech, space, you name it, it is the most heartening thing to see the innovation that is coming out of Australia right now. I've never been more inspired to be in this space, and with the potential of what AI and sort of robotics can do as far as helping these opportunities realize their value, in quicker timeframes with less capital, it also means that this is going to be one of the greatest opportunities from an investor's perspective. So I think, two theses from my side. I think this is one of the greatest times in history to be building a company, and it will get better. And then from an investor side, this is one of the greatest times to be deploying capital. So I will have more of a breakdown of the overall highlights in the second part of what I do. And I'll sort of be covering some of the comments around what people are saying, their concerns around geopolitics and also in Australian politics, or where Australia's at the moment. So yeah, you look forward to that session. And again, thank you very much for joining us.